The cargo bay of the Horizon's Edge hummed with the usual sounds of deep space travel. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked his datapad one more time. The numbers matched perfectly. Container 743 was ready for transfer to the station waiting outside. He had been working on commercial transport ships for 3 years now, and this job had become second nature to him. Load the cargo, secure the containers, transfer them at the stations, and repeat the process at the next stop. It was simple work, but it paid well, and it let him see parts of the galaxy that most humans back on Earth would never witness. The crew of the Horizon's Edge was a mixed bunch, 40 beings from 12 different species all working together under the Galactic Commerce Guild. Jake was one of only 3 humans aboard. The other 2 were up on the bridge running communications and navigation. Down here in the cargo bay, it was just him and whatever alien crew members were assigned to the shift. Today he was working with Zilx, a Therian whose scales shimmered blue and green under the bay lights. Zilx was a good worker and had taught Jake some useful tricks about handling the magnetic locks on the newer containers. Jake walked across the metal floor toward the control panel. His boots made soft clanging sounds with each step. The cargo bay was massive, easily the size of 4 football fields, and right now it was packed with containers heading to various stations along the Kepler corridor. This trade route was one of the busiest in the sector. Ships moved through here every hour carrying everything, from food supplies to mining equipment, to personal items for the colonists spread across dozens of worlds. He reached the control panel and entered his access code. The screen lit up, showing him the status of all the containers in the bay. Everything looked good. Container 743 was locked into position near the airlock. The magnetic field was stable. The station had confirmed they were ready to receive. Jake tapped the communication button. His translator implant kicked in as he spoke. The device was standard issue for all humans working in galactic commerce. It sat behind his ear and translated his words into whatever language the listener needed. It also worked in reverse, turning alien speech into English that he could understand. The technology still amazed him even after 3 years of using it daily. Zilx responded from across the bay. The Therian was doing a final visual check of the container seals. Everything had to be perfect. One loose container during transfer could mean disaster. In space, there was no room for mistakes. Jake had learned that lesson in his first week, when a more experienced crew member had shown him recordings of accidents. The images had stayed with him. Containers tumbling through space, ships with hull breaches, crew members lost to the void. He had been careful ever since. The minutes ticked by as they prepared for transfer. Jake ran through his checklist one more time. Magnetic locks were set. Pressure seals were confirmed. The transfer tunnel between the ship and the station was connected and stable. He gave Zilx a thumbs up. The Therian responded with a gesture that meant the same thing in his culture, a quick double tap of his clawed hand against his chest. Jake initiated the transfer sequence. The magnetic field around container 743 began to shift. The container would float free from its locked position, move slowly through the bay toward the airlock, pass through the transfer tunnel, and lock into place on the station. The whole process would take about 8 minutes. Jake and Zilx would monitor every second of it. The container lifted smoothly. Its massive bulk, easily 20 tons of mining equipment bound for the colonies on Vexel Prime, floated as if it weighed nothing. That was the beauty of magnetic field technology. It made moving impossible loads look easy. Jake watched the readouts on his datapad. Speed was good, trajectory was perfect. The container drifted toward the airlock at exactly the right pace. Then something changed. A warning light flashed on the control panel. Jake looked up from his datapad. The magnetic field readings were fluctuating. Small variations at first, but growing larger with each second. He tapped the communication button to alert the bridge, but before he could speak, the fluctuations became spikes. The magnetic field was failing. Zilx saw it too. The Therian shouted something that the translator turned into a warning. Jake's hands moved across the control panel trying to stabilize the field, but the system was not responding. The container started to drift off course. Its movement changed from smooth and controlled to erratic and dangerous. The massive weight began to spin slowly, picking up speed as the magnetic field collapsed completely. Jake looked up and saw the trajectory. The container was going to hit the far wall. No, not the wall. It was going to hit Zilx. The Therian was standing near the airlock, frozen in shock as 20 tons of metal spun toward him. There was no time to think. Jake's body moved before his mind could process the decision. He ran, his legs pumped hard against the metal floor. His breath came fast. The distance between him and Zilk seemed impossible, but he kept running. The container was spinning faster now, its edge just seconds from crushing the Therian against the bulkhead. Jake reached Zilk's and shoved with everything he had. The Therian stumbled sideways, falling away from the container's path. Jake felt the impact before he saw it. The edge of the container caught him in the chest and lifted him off his feet. There was no pain at first, just pressure and the sensation of flying backward. Then he hit the bulkhead and the pain arrived all at once. His chest felt crushed. His left arm was bent at an angle that was very wrong. His head cracked against the metal wall and his vision went white. He heard more than felt the next impact. The container, still spinning, hit the bulkhead where he had landed. The metal screamed as it bent and tore. Jake's body was caught between the container and the wall. More pressure, more pain. Then a new sound. The sharp hiss of escaping air. The container had torn through the bulkhead. The cargo bay was losing atmosphere. Emergency alarms filled the air. Red lights flashed everywhere. Jake tried to move, but his body would not respond. He could see Zilek scrambling toward the emergency panel. Other crew members were rushing into the bay. Someone was shouting orders. The hissing grew louder as more air escaped into space. Jake felt himself getting cold. His ears were popping from the pressure change. His vision started to go dark at the edges. The last thing he saw was the emergency bulkhead starting to close. The massive door would seal off this section of the cargo bay and stop the air loss. It would save the ship and the crew. Jake tried to call out, but no sound came from his throat. The darkness at the edges of his vision grew larger. The cold was spreading through his whole body now. He could not feel his legs anymore. He could not feel his arms. The pain was fading away into nothing. The emergency bulkhead slammed shut with a final boom that echoed through the bay. The sound reached Jake's ears but barely registered. Everything was going dark now. The cold was complete. His last thought was a simple one. At least Zilk's was safe. Then there was nothing but silence and darkness and cold. The crew sealed the breach within minutes, but the damage was done. Captain Narek stood in the cargo bay looking at the twisted metal and the floating debris. His scaled face showed no emotion, but his tail twitched in the way that Clovians did when they were upset. The medical team had already arrived and was working on the casualties. Zilek sat against the wall with minor injuries, his blue and green scales now dulled with shock. But it was the other figure that drew everyone's attention. Jake Morrison lay crumpled near the damaged bulkhead. His pressure suit was torn in 3 places. His helmet had a crack running across the faceplate. The ship's medical officer, Vurin, moved his scanning device over the human's body. The Ethon physician had served on transport ships for 15 years and had seen many accidents. He knew death when he saw it. The scanner showed nothing. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no respiratory function. The body temperature was dropping rapidly. Vurin looked up at Captain Narex and made the gesture that meant the same thing across a dozen cultures. There was nothing to be done. Jake Morrison was dead. 2 other medical personnel confirmed the assessment. A Drellian nurse checked for any signs of life using her species' more sensitive equipment. A Corvan medical tech ran a deep tissue scan. All results were the same. The human had died from the massive trauma and the exposure to vacuum. His body had been without oxygen for at least 4 minutes before the emergency bulkhead sealed. No known species could survive that. Captain Narex ordered Jake's body to be placed in a preservation unit. Galactic law was clear about deaths in space. The body had to be properly documented and returned to the deceased's homeworld. Personal effects had to be catalogued. Next of kin had to be notified. The captain had done this before, but never for a human. Humans were still new to space travel, still rare on commercial vessels. He wondered how Earth would respond to the news that one of their own had died saving an alien crew member. The preservation unit was a standard medical device used throughout the galaxy. It created a stasis field that prevented biological decay. Jake's body was carefully placed inside. The unit sealed with a soft hiss and the blue glow of the stasis field activated. Vurin attached monitoring equipment more out of habit than necessity. The equipment would track the stasis field's integrity during transport. Everyone in the medical bay knew that the human inside was beyond help. The Horizon's Edge continued on its route to Vexel Prime Station. The trip would take 18 hours. During that time, the crew worked to repair the damaged cargo bay and file the incident reports. Zilks was treated for his minor injuries and released. The Therian insisted on staying near the medical bay. He wanted to be close to the human who had saved his life. Other crew members stopped by to pay their respects. Even species that had never met Jake came to see the preservation unit and hear the story of his sacrifice. Captain Narek sent the required communications to Earth. The message would take days to reach human authorities because of the distance. He included a full report of the incident, Jake's service record, and a personal note praising the humans' bravery. He also contacted the Galactic Commerce Guild to report the death and request that Jake's family be compensated according to guild regulations. The paperwork was extensive, but the captain did it all himself. It was the least he could do. When the Horizon's Edge docked at Vexal Prime Station, the medical team transferred Jake's preservation unit to the Celestial Hope Medical Complex. The facility was one of the best in 4 sectors. It had departments for every known species and equipment that most planets could only dream of owning. The complex handled everything from routine medical care to advanced research. Its morgue section was equally impressive, designed to handle the unique requirements of dozens of different species. Dr. Kelvin received the preservation unit in the morgue's intake area. The Zentari pathologist read through the reports from the Horizon's Edge. Massive blunt force trauma, exposure to vacuum, multiple system failures. The cause of death seemed obvious, but galactic law required a full examination. Dr. Kelvin was known for his thorough work. He would document everything properly so that Earth's authorities would have complete information. He was joined by Dr. Lysandra, an Erythian physician who had requested to assist with the examination. Lysandra had a particular interest in human biology. When humans first joined the galactic community 23 years ago, she had been fascinated by their unique characteristics. She had read every piece of human medical literature available in the galactic databases. She had even requested copies of Earth medical textbooks, though the information was often difficult to obtain. Humans were protective of their medical knowledge, perhaps because they were still learning how their biology compared to other species. The 2 doctors prepared the examination room. Standard protocol required specific environmental conditions. They set the temperature to match what humans considered normal. They adjusted the atmospheric mixture to Earth standard. They activated the full scanning array that would document every detail of the examination. Dr. Kelvin opened the preservation unit and the stasis field faded. Jake's body remained motionless on the examination table. Dr. Lysandra began the preliminary scans while Dr. Kelvin prepared the documentation system. The scans would create a complete 3-dimensional map of the body, showing all injuries and the sequence of damage. This information would help determine the exact cause of death, even though it seemed obvious from the reports. Lysandra moved the scanner slowly from Jake's head down to his feet. The display showed the extensive damage: fractured ribs, collapsed lung, ruptured spleen, broken left arm, skull fracture. The list went on, but something caught her attention. She ran the scanner over Jake's chest again. Then she checked the display settings to make sure the equipment was calibrated correctly. She ran the scan a 3rd time. Dr. Kelvin noticed her hesitation and moved closer to look at the display. He saw what had caught her attention. The cellular decay was not progressing as it should. In fact, there appeared to be no decay at all. Dr. Kelvin suggested that the preservation field had been particularly effective. The stasis technology was designed to halt all biological processes. Perhaps the unit from the Horizon's Edge had been newer or better maintained than usual. But Dr. Lysandra was not convinced. She requested a deep tissue scan. This type of scan could detect activity at the molecular level. It was usually used for disease diagnosis, not death examination, but she wanted to be thorough. The deep tissue scan took several minutes to complete. The results appeared on the display and both doctors stared in silence. There was electrical activity in Jake's neural pathways. It was faint, barely detectable, but it was there. Dr. Kelvin immediately declared it must be residual energy. Many species showed lingering electrical patterns shortly after death. It meant nothing. But Dr. Lysandra wanted to investigate further. She connected Jake to the medical complex's most sophisticated monitoring system. This system had been developed to track biological processes in critically ill patients. It could detect a single heartbeat in an hour. It could measure oxygen consumption so slow that it seemed like none at all. It could map brain activity that was nearly dormant. The system was designed for the most delicate medical situations. Dr. Lysandra hoped it might give them more information about these strange readings. The monitoring system took 20 minutes to complete its full analysis. During that time, Dr. Kelvin prepared the death documentation. He was certain this was just an unusual case of residual biological activity. He had seen similar things before in other species. But when the monitoring system's results appeared, both doctors forgot about documentation. Jake Morrison's cells were not dead. They were operating in a state that neither doctor had ever seen before. The metabolic processes had slowed to almost nothing, but they had not stopped. His heart was beating. The system had detected 3 beats in the 20 minutes of monitoring. His brain showed activity patterns consistent with deep unconsciousness. His core temperature had stabilized at 12 degrees Celsius. Every indicator suggested that Jake was not dead, but rather in some kind of extreme hibernation state. Dr. Lysandra acted immediately. She called for emergency revival equipment. Dr. Kelvin stood frozen in shock for a moment before his training took over. He began adjusting the room's environmental controls. They needed to warm Jake's body slowly. Too fast could cause additional damage. They needed to provide oxygen, but at what rate? They needed to support his body's functions, but they did not know what was normal for a human in this condition. The medical complex's databases had limited information on human biology. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Most medical facilities had treated only a handful of humans for minor issues. There was no documentation of anything like this. Dr. Lysandra sent emergency requests to specialists across 3 sectors. She tried to establish communication with Earth, but the distance made real-time consultation impossible. Any answer from human doctors would take days to arrive. Meanwhile, Jake's body continued its mysterious process. His core temperature rose by 1 degree over the next hour. His heart rate increased to 1 beat every 3 minutes. The monitoring system showed his cells slowly increasing their metabolic activity. It was as if his body had 36 hours after being declared dead. Jake Morrison's eyes opened. The lights above him were too bright, and he closed them again immediately. Pain rushed through his body like electricity. Every bone ached, every muscle trembled. His chest felt like someone had placed a heavy weight on it. He tried to move his left arm, but the pain that shot through his shoulder made him gasp. His throat was so dry that the gasp came out as a rough scratching sound. Dr. Lysandra heard the sound and rushed to his side. She had been monitoring Jake constantly, sleeping in short periods in the chair beside his bed. She spoke softly, letting his translator implant process her words. She told him he was safe. She told him he was in a hospital. She told him not to try to move. Jake's eyes opened again, and this time he managed to keep them open despite the brightness. He saw the face of an alien looking down at him with what he somehow recognized as concern. His memories were scattered like puzzle pieces dumped on a floor. He remembered the cargo bay. He remembered the container spinning toward Zilks. He remembered pushing the Therian. Then there was nothing but cold and darkness and a sense of falling that never ended. He tried to speak, but his throat would not cooperate. Dr. Lysandra held a small device to his lips. Water came out in a gentle spray. The cool liquid on his dry throat felt like the most wonderful thing he had ever experienced. After several moments, Jake managed to form words. His voice was weak and rough, but the translator implant worked. He asked where he was. Dr. Lysandra explained that he was at the Celestial Hope Medical Complex on Vexel Prime Station. He asked what happened. She told him about the accident, about the crew finding him in the cargo bay, about how everyone thought he was dead. She did not mention yet that he had been dead for 18 hours according to every medical device in the galaxy. Jake's mind struggled to process this information. He remembered the impact. He remembered the cold. But death seemed like something that should feel different. Shouldn't there be something else, something beyond the darkness? Or maybe the darkness was all there was and he had simply been lucky enough to come back from it. He asked about Zilks. Dr. Lysandra smiled, a gesture that worked the same way across most species. She told him the Therian was fine, that Jake had saved his life. Over the next hours, Jake became more alert. Dr. Kelvin joined Dr. Lysandra, and together they ran tests. They scanned every part of Jake's body. They measured his vital signs. They checked his neural activity. They drew blood samples. They asked him questions about how he felt, what hurt, whether he could move different parts of his body. Jake cooperated as best he could, though he did not understand why they seemed so amazed by everything. The test results were remarkable. The fractures in Jake's ribs were already healing. The tissue damage in his chest was resolving itself. His collapsed lung had reinflated and was functioning normally. The broken bones in his left arm were knitting back together at a rate that seemed impossible. Dr. Kelvin had treated members of dozens of species. He had seen fast healers and slow healers, but he had never seen anything like this. A Therian with similar injuries would need 3 months to recover. A Clovian would need 5 months. Jake's body was healing in days. Dr. Lysandra asked Jake about Earth, about human biology, about whether this was normal. Jake did not know how to answer. He told her that humans healed from injuries, but he did not know if his healing was faster or slower than normal. He had broken his arm once as a child, and it had taken weeks to heal, but that had been different. A simple fracture from falling off a bike. This was massive trauma. He should not even be alive, much less healing so quickly. She showed him the monitoring data from the first hours after his arrival. She explained how his body had been in a state that mimicked death. She used the term emergency hibernation. She explained that his cells had shut down almost completely, that his heart had nearly stopped, that his body temperature had dropped far below what any spacefaring species could survive. Jake listened in growing amazement. He had no idea humans could do such a thing. No one back on Earth had ever mentioned this in any medical training or safety briefing. Dr. Kelvin presented his theory. He believed that humans had evolved an extreme survival mechanism. When facing fatal trauma, the human body could enter a protective state. This state preserved the brain and vital organs while the body focused all its energy on survival and repair. It was a biological response so profound that it looked exactly like death to anyone who did not know what to look for. He admitted that this was just a theory. They needed more data. They needed to study other humans. They needed to understand how common this ability was. News of Jake's survival spread quickly through the medical complex. Doctors and nurses from other departments asked to meet him. Scientists requested permission to take additional samples. Researchers wanted to document this phenomenon. Dr. Lysandra became protective of her patient. She limited visitors. She refused requests for invasive testing. She told everyone that Jake needed time to recover, and that studying him like a laboratory specimen was not appropriate. But the news spread beyond the medical complex. It reached the station's communication networks. Reporters started calling. The Galactic News Network sent a team. Scientists from universities across multiple sectors transmitted requests for information. The Galactic Medical Council convened an emergency session to discuss the implications. If humans could survive in conditions that would kill any other species, then everything about space safety protocols might need to be reconsidered. Military. Officers from 3 different species visited the medical complex. They did not ask to see Jake, but they spoke with Dr. Kelvin at length. They wanted to know if this ability could be trained. They wanted to know if all humans had it or just some. They wanted to know if there were limits. The doctor answered their questions carefully. He explained that they simply did not know enough yet. This was the first documented case. More research was needed before anyone could draw conclusions. Jake found himself at the center of attention he had never wanted. He was just a cargo specialist. He had pushed Zilix out of the way because it was the right thing to do. He had not thought about surviving or about biological mechanisms. He had just acted. Now everyone was treating him like he was some kind of scientific miracle. Reporters camped outside the medical complex hoping for an interview. Scientists sent messages asking if he would participate in studies. Even people he had never met sent him notes expressing amazement at his survival. Zilix visited on the 3rd day. The Therian entered Jake's room hesitantly, his scales dull with emotion. He stood beside the bed for a long moment without speaking. Then he reached out with one clawed hand and placed it gently on Jake's shoulder, careful to avoid the injured side. His translator implant conveyed words that were thick with feeling. He thanked Jake for saving his life. He said that his family on his homeworld had been notified, and they wanted to express their gratitude. He said that Jake's name would be honored in Therian tradition as a true friend. Jake felt embarrassed by the praise. He told Zilix that any crew member would have done the same thing. But the Therian shook his head. He explained that not every species valued individual life the way humans seemed to. Some species would have calculated the risk and chosen self-preservation. Some would have frozen in fear. Jake had acted without hesitation, without thought for his own safety. That made him exceptional not just among humans but among all the species of the galaxy. Captain Nerix came the next day. The Clovian brought formal apologies from the ship's crew. He explained that they had declared Jake dead based on all available medical evidence. No one could have known about this human ability. He presented Jake with a commendation for bravery, an official recognition from the Galactic Commerce Guild. He also offered Jake his position back on the horizon's edge, with a promotion and increased pay. The ship would be in port for another week while repairs were completed. Jake would be welcome to return whenever he was ready. Other crew members visited over the following days. Engineers who had worked the same shifts, navigation officers who had shared meals in the crew dining area, even the ship's cook, a gentle Morellian who always made sure to prepare human-compatible food. They all expressed amazement at his survival and gratitude for his sacrifice. Jake appreciated their visits, but he also felt overwhelmed. He was not a hero. He was just someone who had been in the right place to help, but not everyone viewed Jake's survival positively. A delegation from the Galactic Safety Commission arrived at the medical complex on the 6th day. They interviewed Dr. Kelvin and Dr. Lysandra at length. They reviewed all the medical data. They asked pointed questions about whether human vital signs could be accurately measured. They expressed concern that if human biology was this different from other species, then current safety protocols might be inadequate. The commission representatives visited Jake briefly. They were polite but formal. They asked him questions about his training, his medical history, whether anyone in his family had survived similar trauma. Jake answered as honestly as he could, but he did not have much information to give them. The commission thanked him for his time and left. Later, Dr. Lysandra told him that the commission was considering recommendations about human crew members. Dr. Lysandra spent more time with Jake as the days passed. She would sit in the chair beside his bed during the quiet hours and they would talk. She asked him about Earth, and he told her stories about his home planet. He described the seasons, how some parts of the year were hot and others were cold. He explained about snow and rain and wind. He told her about oceans that covered most of the planet's surface and mountains that reached high into the sky. She listened with fascination because Earth sounded like a world of extremes. She shared with him what she had been researching. She had requested access to Earth's cultural databases and had spent hours reading about human history. What she found amazed her. Humans had survived in every environment their planet offered. They lived in frozen regions where temperatures dropped far below freezing. They lived in deserts where the heat could kill other species in hours. They lived on high mountains where the air was thin. They lived in dense jungles filled with dangerous creatures. Everywhere on Earth, in every extreme condition, humans had found a way to survive. Jake had never thought about it that way. To him, Earth was just home. Yes, there were cold places and hot places, but that was normal. Every planet had different environments. But Dr. Lysandra explained that most spacefaring species came from worlds that were much more stable. The Therians evolved on a planet with minimal temperature variation. The Clovians came from a world with no true seasons. The Ethans had never experienced anything colder than what humans would consider a mild spring day. Earth was unusual in its extremes, and humans were unusual in their ability to adapt to those extremes. She told him about other things she had discovered in her research. She read about humans who had survived drowning in freezing water. Their bodies had shut down and then restarted after rescue. She read about people who had been declared dead and then revived. She read about explorers who had endured conditions that should have killed them. She read about survival in situations that other species would have considered impossible. The pattern was clear. Humans were built to survive against incredible odds. Dr. Lysandra began writing a paper about her findings. She worked on it during the late hours when the medical complex was quiet. She titled it Human Adaptive Survival Mechanisms and Their Implications for Xenobiology. In the paper, she argued that humans represented a unique type of biology in the galaxy. Most spacefaring species had evolved toward stability and specialization. Humans had evolved toward adaptability and resilience. This made them less efficient in stable environments but far more capable in extreme or dangerous situations. She shared her work with Dr. Kelvin. The Zentari pathologist read through her paper carefully. He suggested changes and additions. He helped her refine the technical language. Together, they documented everything about Jake's case. They included the initial death diagnosis, the discovery of his hibernation state, the revival process, and his remarkable healing rate. They added comparative data from other species. They proposed theories about the biological mechanisms involved. The paper grew into a comprehensive study of human survival capabilities. When the paper was complete, Dr. Lysandra submitted it to the Galactic Medical Council. The response was immediate and intense. Some council members praised the research and called for expanded studies of human biology. They argued that understanding human capabilities could lead to breakthroughs in medical treatment for all species. Others expressed concern about the implications. If humans were this different, this resilient, then how would they fit into galactic society? Would they need different rules, different safety standards, different medical protocols? A debate erupted across scientific communities throughout multiple sectors. Some researchers celebrated humanity as a fascinating example of adaptive evolution. They wanted to study humans, to learn from them, to understand how their biology achieved such remarkable feats. Others worried that humanity's differences would create problems. They pointed out that medical equipment designed for other species might not work properly on humans. They noted that safety protocols based on standard biology might not apply. They questioned whether humans could be integrated into mixed species environments safely. The controversy reached the general public through news broadcasts. The Galactic News Network ran a special report titled The Unkillable Human. Other networks picked up the story. Social discussion platforms across dozens of worlds filled with debates about humanity. Some species expressed admiration. Others expressed fear. Many simply expressed curiosity about these tough, adaptable beings from Earth. Back on Earth, the news was received with mixed feelings. Humans were proud that one of their own had survived such incredible trauma. They were pleased that humanity's resilience was being recognized across the galaxy. But they were also concerned about the controversy. Human leadership worried that being seen as too different might hurt humanity's integration into galactic society. They sent official statements to the Galactic Council emphasizing that humans wanted to work cooperatively with all species, and that their biological differences should not be seen as threatening. Jake watched all of this unfold from his hospital bed. He had access to news feeds and spent hours reading about the debates his survival had caused. He felt responsible for the controversy, even though Dr. Lysandra kept telling him he had done nothing wrong. He had simply survived. The galaxy's reaction to that survival was not his fault, but he still felt that somehow he had made things complicated for humanity. On the 10th day after waking up, Jake was finally allowed to walk around. His injuries had healed to the point where movement was safe, though he still tired easily. Dr. Lysandra accompanied him on a walk through the medical complex. They moved slowly through the corridors, and Jake marveled at the facility. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of any hospital he had seen on Earth. The corridors were wide to accommodate species of different sizes. The walls displayed information in multiple languages and formats. Medical staff from dozens of species moved past them, going about their duties. They stopped at an observation window that looked out onto the station. Fexel Prime was a massive structure, a city in space that housed over 2 million beings from across the galaxy. Ships of every size and design docked at the station's multiple ports. Jake could see the horizon's edge in the distance, still undergoing repairs. Beyond the station stretched the endless darkness of space, dotted with distant stars. He had been out there somewhere, floating in that darkness, his body shut down and waiting for a rescue that almost did not recognize he could still be saved. Dr. Lysandra stood beside him quietly for a moment. Then she spoke about her concerns for the future. She worried that the controversy surrounding Jake's survival might lead to discrimination against humans. She had already heard some medical facilities saying they were not equipped to treat humans. Some commercial vessels were reconsidering their policies about hiring human crew members. The fear of the unknown was causing reactions that could harm humanity's place in the galaxy. Jake asked her what could be done. She explained that education was the key. The more other species understood about human biology, the less frightening it would seem. She had been invited to present her paper at a major medical conference. She wanted Jake to come with her if he felt well enough. Seeing him in person, hearing his story directly, might help other species understand that humans were not so different. They just had survival capabilities that were unique. He agreed to go. If his presence could help reduce the fear and controversy, then he would do it. He owed that much to humanity and to all the people who had helped him survive. Dr. Lysandra smiled with relief. She had hoped he would agree. The conference was scheduled for 3 weeks away. That would give Jake time to fully recover and give them time to prepare. Zilix visited again that evening. The Therian brought news from the horizon's edge. The repairs were nearly complete. Captain Nerex was planning to depart in 5 days. The captain had asked Zilx to check whether Jake would be ready to return to duty. The ship's crew wanted him back. They had even prepared a small ceremony to welcome him. Zilix made it clear that there was no pressure. If Jake needed more time or wanted to transfer to a different ship, everyone would understand. Jake thought about it carefully. Part of him wanted to return to the simple work of moving cargo through space. Part of him wanted to go back to the life he had known before the accident. But another part of him recognized that his life had changed. He was now the human who had survived death. His story was being discussed across the galaxy. He had responsibilities beyond just doing his job. He told Zilix that he would return to the horizon's edge eventually, but first he needed to attend the medical conference with Dr. Lysandra. The Therian understood, and promised to convey the message to Captain Nerex over the next days. Jake continued his recovery. His strength returned. The pain faded to manageable levels. He practiced walking longer distances through the medical complex. He spent time reading more about the controversy his survival had created. He prepared himself for the attention he would receive at the medical conference. Dr. Lysandra coached him on what questions to expect and how to answer them clearly without overwhelming his audience with technical details. She also shared more of her. 3 weeks after being declared dead, Jake Morrison stood before the entrance of the Celestial Hope Medical Complex preparing to leave. The morning had arrived with a flurry of activity. Medical staff had completed his final examinations. Dr. Kelvin had signed the discharge documents. Dr. Lysandra had prepared a data pad containing all of his medical records to take with him. Everything was ready, but the departure had become much more complicated than anyone expected. Outside the medical complex, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread that Jake would be leaving today, and beings from dozens of species wanted to see the human who had survived death. News crews from multiple networks had set up their equipment. Reporters jostled for position, hoping to ask questions. Security personnel from the station worked to maintain order. The scene was chaotic and overwhelming. Jake stood inside looking through the transparent doors, wondering how he was supposed to walk through all of that. Dr. Lysandra placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. She had seen the crowd gathering since early morning and had tried to prepare him for this moment. She reminded him that he did not have to answer any questions if he did not want to. He could simply walk to the transport that was waiting to take him to his quarters on the station. Security would make sure he got through safely, but she also told him that if he wanted to say something, this was his opportunity. The galaxy was watching, and his words would be heard across multiple sectors. Jake took a deep breath and made his decision. He would walk out there. He would face the cameras and the questions. He would do his best to represent humanity well. Dr. Lysandra smiled and squeezed his shoulder gently. Together they walked toward the doors. Dr. Kelvin joined them, wanting to be present for this moment. The three of them stood at the threshold for a brief second, and then the doors opened. The sound hit Jake first. Voices calling out in multiple languages that his translator implant struggled to process. Cameras clicking and whirring. The general murmur of a large crowd. He stepped forward and the noise intensified. Security personnel formed a corridor through the crowd, creating a path toward the waiting transport. But before he could start walking, something unexpected happened. The medical staff of the Celestial Hope Medical Complex had lined up along the corridor inside the building. Doctors, nurses, technicians, and administrators from every department stood in 2 neat rows. As Jake passed between them, they began a gesture that was universal across the galaxy. They placed their hands, claws, or appendages over the centers of their chests in a sign of respect. Species that had never met Jake before acknowledged him. Beings who had only heard about his case showed their recognition of what he had survived. Jake felt emotion tighten his throat. He had not expected this. He nodded to the staff as he passed, trying to make eye contact with as many as he could. These people had dedicated their lives to healing others. Their respect meant more to him than any news coverage or public attention. When he reached the end of the corridor where the medical staff stood, Dr. Kelvin stepped forward. The Zentari pathologist carried a small box. He opened it to reveal a medallion on a simple chain. The medallion was made of a blue metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Dr. Kelvin explained that this was a ceremonial token from the Celestial Hope Medical Complex. It was traditionally given to patients who survived impossible odds. The medallion had been awarded only 73 times in the facility's 200-year history. Jake was the first human to receive this honor. Jake accepted the medallion with gratitude. Dr. Kelvin placed it around his neck and then stepped back. The medical staff applauded in their various ways. Some clapped their hands. Others created sounds with their appendages. A few species vocalized in tones that expressed approval. The moment lasted for 30 seconds, and then Jake turned toward the doors that led outside. The security corridor held as Jake walked through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions from both sides. Most of the questions were lost in the noise, but a few came through clearly. How did it feel to come back from death? Did he remember anything from when he was unconscious? What did he think about the controversy his survival had created? Jake kept walking, but he listened to the questions and chose one to answer. He stopped halfway through the corridor. The security personnel tensed but held their positions. The crowd quieted slightly, sensing that Jake was about to speak. He looked around at the various species represented. He saw faces and forms from species he recognized and some he had never encountered before. He spoke clearly, trusting his translator implant to carry his words. He said that he did not remember being dead because he was not sure he had actually died. His body had done something remarkable to protect itself, and he was grateful for that. He thanked the medical team at Celestial Hope Medical Complex, especially Dr. Lysandra and Dr. Kelvin, for recognizing that he could still be saved. He expressed his hope that his experience would help improve medical understanding and would benefit other humans who might face similar situations in the future. Then he addressed the controversy directly. He said that humans wanted to be good members of the galactic community. They did not want to be seen as dangerous or too different. Yes, human biology had some unique characteristics, but every species had unique characteristics. That was what made the galaxy interesting. He hoped that instead of fearing human differences, other species would see them as potentially beneficial. In a dangerous universe, having friends who were hard to kill might be valuable. The crowd listened in silence. Some reporters recorded every word. Others simply watched this human who had become the center of so much attention. When Jake finished speaking, he did not wait for follow-up questions. He nodded politely and continued walking toward the transport. The security corridor held until he reached the vehicle. Dr. Lysandra and Dr. Kelvin followed close, behind as the transport door closed. Behind them, Jake let out a long breath. Dr. Lysandra laughed softly and told him he had done well. His words had been clear and respectful while still making important points. Dr. Kelvin agreed that the statement was exactly what the situation needed. Now they had to prepare for the medical conference, which would be even more challenging because the audience would be full of experts who would ask detailed technical questions. The transport carried them across the station to the residential section where Jake had been assigned temporary quarters. The Galactic Commerce Guild had provided him with a comfortable apartment while he completed his recovery. The guild had also assigned him a modest settlement payment for the accident. Captain Nerex had visited the previous week to present the payment authorization and to formally invite Jake back to the horizon's edge whenever he was ready. Jake spent the next 2 days preparing for the medical conference. Dr. Lysandra coached him on how to explain his experience in terms that medical professionals would understand. She also prepared her presentation, refining the data and the conclusions. The conference would be attended by over 500 physicians, researchers, and medical administrators from across 4 sectors. It was one of the most important medical gatherings of the year. The day of the conference arrived. Jake put on his best clothes, simple but neat. He attached the medallion from the Celestial Hope Medical Complex to his jacket where it would be visible. Dr. Lysandra wore formal robes from her home world. Together they traveled to the conference center, a large facility near the station's main hub. The building could accommodate thousands of beings and had presentation halls equipped with the latest technology. Dr. Lysandra presented her paper first. She showed slides of data, explained her theories about human adaptive survival mechanisms, and walked the audience through Jake's case in detail. The medical professionals listened with intense focus. When she finished her presentation, the questions began. They came rapidly from all parts of the audience. How common was this hibernation ability among humans? What triggered the response? Could it be induced artificially? Were there any negative effects? How should medical protocols be adjusted to account for this? Dr. Lysandra answered each question as thoroughly as she could. When she did not know an answer, she said so honestly. Medical science was just beginning to understand human survival capabilities. More research was needed. More cases needed to be documented. But what they already knew suggested that humans possessed remarkable biological resilience that deserved respect and further study. Then it was Jake's turn. He walked to the front of the hall, and hundreds of beings from dozens of species focused their attention on him. He told his story simply and clearly. He described the accident, what he remembered, and what he experienced during recovery. He answered questions from the audience about how it felt, whether he had control over the hibernation response, and what his life had been like since surviving. One question came from a Therian physician in the back of the hall. She asked whether Jake felt different now, whether surviving death had changed him in ways beyond the physical. Jake thought about the question carefully before answering. He said that he did feel different, but not in the way she might expect. He felt grateful. He felt responsible. He felt aware of how precious life was and how quickly it could be lost. But he also felt human, completely and thoroughly human, and that had not changed.